Can I ask you a question? Has this pandemic been stressful para sa'yo? Has it made you weary and tired? Nasabi mo ba sa sarili mo, pagod na ako? Sana God will bring me to a place of rest. Alam mo, para sa akin, this pandemic has been a very trying period. Maraming nagbago sa negosyo namin. Marami ring dumating na problema na directly related sa COVID-19. As I struggled through my many problems, Psalm 95 caught my attention. And Psalm 95 verse 11 said, "Therefore I swore in my anger, truly they shall not enter into my rest." In Psalm 95 verse 11, the Lord was angry with Israel kasi they were very stubborn. They chose to reject His instructions and insisted on doing things their way. Because of this, they were not able to enjoy the rest that God promised to give them after He delivered them from slavery in Egypt. Many times during this pandemic, nasabi ko kay God, Lord, pagod na ako. Will you bring me to a place of rest? Pero since I did not find rest, natanong ko si God, sabi ko, Lord, galit ka ba sa akin? Pero since I cannot go anywhere because of the quarantine and travel restriction, I decided to study the meaning of this verse. Naisip ko, baka if I understand what it means, I may be able to find rest even while I stay put. Kayo, are you weary and tired? Have you been trying to find rest from your troubles? The Hebrew word for rest is menusha, which means a resting place. It is also a picture of a watering pool. No, mas a desert na after a long tiring walk, makita ka ng tubig where there will be trees so that where you can refresh yourself. So yun yung picture na binibigay niya. It also means a satisfied state. When I cross-reference Psalm 95 verse 11, I saw two verses that bothered me. They are Exodus 33 verse 14 and also Matthew chapter 11 verse 28. Sabi ng Exodus 33 verse 14, and He said, "My presence shall go with you, and I will give you rest." In Matthew 11 verse 28, Jesus said naman, "Come to me, all you who are weary and heavy laden, and I will give you rest." Alam mo, these verses bothered me because they seem to be telling me that the rest I am looking for is not based on a place, but based on God's presence. Kaya siguro hindi niya sinagot yung prayer ko kasi hindi naman lugar ang gusto niyang ibigay sa akin. Pero nung na-realize ko to, napatanong ako ulit, is it possible to be in the Lord's presence and find no rest? Is it possible to walk with God and yet be weary and tired? Is it possible to be called a Christian and yet have no peace? Alam ba nyo na Israel was supposed to enter the promised land after a year of leaving Egypt? Kaso lang, the Lord forced them back to the wilderness when they refused to enter the land because of the bad report of the 10 spies. And we see yung pagsabi niya bumalik kayo sa wilderness in Numbers chapter 14 verses 34 at saka 35. Sabi ng verse 34, "According to the number of days which you spied out the land, 40 days. For every day you shall bear a guilt a year, even 40 years. And you will know my opposition. I, the Lord, have spoken. Surely this I will do to all this evil congregation who are gathered together against me. In this wilderness they shall be destroyed, and they will die." When they went back to the wilderness, God was with them. He continued to provide their food and water. And He even protected them from the enemies who wanted to attack them. You see, all the nations around them saw this big number of people, around 2 to 3 million, walking the desert. So, alam nila, it's a very, very big set of people who can defeat them if they decide to attack. So, some people wanted to attack them, but God prevented them. However, even though God was with them in the desert, most of them died in the wilderness and never experienced the rest God promised to give. So it seems that being with God, with the Lord, is not a guarantee of finding rest. So I ask, paano ko ba ito mahanap? In order to answer this question, I decided to first determine what makes people tired and weary ba. You know, I was asking myself, is it work? Does work make us weary and tired? Alam mo, sabi ni Tado, this comedian, I heard he died recently. Sabi niya, meron siyang t-shirt, sabi niya, bahala ng tamad, wag lang pagod. Pero ang tanong ko, ang tamad ba hindi napapagod? Di ba nakakapagod yung parati kang pinapagalitan kasi batugan ka? So maski tamad, napapagod din. And para sa akin, work is not a source of stress. Kasi if you enjoy what you are doing, you can be in a satisfied state even if you are physically tired. I remember when I was working for HP, people would ask me how I am able to keep my pace. I would tell them that it is because of my wife. Alam mo, my wife, si Pichi, allowed me to focus on my work by filling up what I lacked and by completing what I needed. You know, my wife back then, pag umuwi ako late, she never nags me. I believe the worst thing that she told me was she would say, hinahanap ka ng mga bata, and that made me feel bad. But the rest, she would complete what I lacked. And so my work became a joy. So kung hindi trabaho ang nagpapapagod sa atin, ano? Is it our situation or our circumstances? You know, recently, I made a survey about what people learned about themselves during this pandemic. You know, some people felt that this is a curse kasi nawalan sila ng trabaho eh. And ngayon, ang hirap-hirap, very inconvenient. However, some people see it as a blessing. Marami sa kanila na sumagot sa survey ko, sabi nila, they realize na blessed pala sila. Because ang dami-dami nilang mga blessing na hindi nila napansin noon. Marami silang natututunan as they stay in the house, and then they appreciate the joy of being with family. So, the same situation, two different responses. One see this pandemic as a curse, the other saw this as a blessing. So, hindi sitwasyon ang nagpapastress sa atin. As I studied Psalm 95 verse 11, I realized that physical stress is not the reason why people get weary and tired. We get weary and tired because of emotional stress. When we are in conflict with others. This is when I prayed to the Lord and said, Lord, pagod na ako. Bring me to a place of rest. Because recently, ang dami-dami kong conflict with people that was brought about by the pandemic. It was emotional stress that made the Jews ask God to deliver them from being slaves in Egypt. They cried out for help, not because of their physical work, but because of the oppression they were experiencing from the Egyptians. When God finally heard them, He gave them a promise in Exodus chapter 3, verse 8. Let me read that for you. Sabi ng Exodus chapter 3, verse 8, So I have come down to deliver them from the power of the Egyptians, and to bring them from that land to a good and spacious land, to a land flowing with milk and honey, to the place of the Canaanites, and the Hittites, and the Amorites, and the Perizzites, and the Hivites, and the Jebusites. The promised land was supposed to be a place of rest where they would be in a satisfied state. Pero when the Jews saw the land, were they excited? Did they obey the Lord when He said, go enter it? Di ba hindi? When the spies saw the land, they got emotionally stressed because they saw people who would bring them physical and emotional pain. What do I mean? Go to Numbers chapter 13, verse 27 and 28. Sabi ng verse 27, thus they told him, they were talking to Moses, and said, we went into the land where you sent us, and it clearly does flow with milk and honey, and this is its fruit. Nevertheless, the people who live in the land are strong, and the cities are fortified, and very large. And moreover, we saw the descendants of Anak there. Ang ibig sabihin ng descendants ni Anak, these are giants. So siguro nung nakita nila yung lupa, na-imagine nila, wow, naging slave kami sa Egypt. Pagdating dito, sigurado magiging slave na naman kami. Friends, think about this. What did you notice about the land that God was giving them, the promised land? What did you notice? Will it give them a satisfied state? The place of rest that God was giving Israel then was not trouble-free. And this was when I realized, alam mo, if God brings me to another place to save me from my conflicts today, alam mo, walang assurance na that place will give me rest and peace. Kasi pwede rin magkaroon siya ng problema. And siguro, that is why God did not answer talaga the prayer. Because even if He brings me to another place, there will be trouble that I will have to face. So this affirms my realization earlier that the rest God wants to give me is not based on a place, it is not based on my situation, and as I told you earlier, the presence of the Lord does not automatically bring a satisfied state. If this is the case, what will bring me peace and rest? What is this rest based on, and how can I find it? When Moses was leading Israel through the wilderness, alam mo, ang daming taong umaway sa kanya. And he was in constant conflict throughout the 40 years as they journeyed through the wilderness. In Numbers 11, sabi doon, the rebels demanded meat. Ano tong mga rebels? Rebels mean mga tao na hindi Jews na sumama lang sa kanila. They were actually Egyptians. Na when they saw that God was destroying Egypt, sumama sila sa mga Jews. And ito yung mga reklamador. So naisip ko, ba't ba ito reklamo ng reklamo? I realized na it is because sila wala. You see, before Israel left Egypt, the Bible tells us that the Jews plundered the Egyptians. Meaning, lahat ng yaman ng Egyptians, ipinasa nila sa mga Jews para lang umalis sila. And maybe the rebels, the Egyptians na sumabit, were lacking. And so they went to Moses and demanded for meat. You know, abusado, no? Sumamat, nakisabit lang, demanding pa. In Numbers 12, Miriam and Aaron challenged the authority of Moses. And because he married a wife who was not a Jew, sabi nila, you are not fit to lead us. Can you imagine? In Numbers 14 naman, the 10 spies wanted to stone Moses for trying to force them to enter the promised land. And then in Numbers 16, Korah, a Levite, questioned his credibility. Sabi niya, bakit ikaw lang ba huli? Huli rin naman kami ha. May tanong ako sa iyo. If you were Moses, how would you feel? Alam mo ano sabi ni Moses? One time he went to God, sabi niya, Lord, hindi ko naman hiningi ito, di ba? Nananahimik ako doon sa desert ng Midian. I was happy being a shepherd. Remember in Exodus chapter 3, Moses was debating with God because sabi niya, ayoko gawin yung pinapagawa mo. It's too big for me. And yet when he agreed, ang dami-daming conflict na nangyari. Pero may tanong ako. Did Moses confront his accusers? Hindi. Did his accusers make him weary and tired? Natanong ko yun eh. Did that conflict make him weary and tired? I don't know, but wala akong nabasa. And I realized ko, when Moses was not fighting back or challenging them, the Lord defended him each time. Na in spite of the conflict, Moses had peace and rest because the Lord gave him that rest in spite of the conflict. The Bible tells us that Moses found so much favor in the Lord that the Lord would treat him as a friend and talk to him every day. Moses found rest in spite of the trouble around him because of the favor of the Lord. But there was one incident that got Moses into trouble. In fact, it robbed him of the opportunity to enter the promised land and experience rest doon. This happened in the desert of Meribah when he struck the stone and disobeyed the Lord's instruction. Let me read about that in Deuteronomy 4:21. Moses was relating this to the Jews. Sabi niya, "Now the Lord was angry with me on your account and swore that I would not cross the Jordan and that I would not enter the good land which the Lord your God is giving you as an inheritance." You know, I always feel bothered by this story kasi ang tanong ko, what sin did Moses commit? Did he violate any of the 10 Commandments? He disqualified himself only because he did not follow the Lord's instruction. Sabi ni God, speak to the rock so that water will come out. Sa galit niya sa mga Jews, he struck it with his staff 2 times. Alam mo, nabaliwala ang pinagtrabahuan ni Moses for 40 years because of one incident. Do you think that was fair? You know, in our perspective, no, sa atin, parang hindi. Pero so natanong ko, bakit to nangyari? Why did God allow Moses not to enter the promised land because of one incident that may be small para sa atin? Why was it so major before the Lord? Deuteronomy chapter 12 verses 8 and 9 explains this. Sabi ng verse 8, "You shall not do at all what we are doing here today. Every man doing whatever is right in his own eyes. For you have not as yet come to the resting place and the inheritance which the Lord your God is giving you." The Jews did not find rest when they would do what was right in their own eyes. Moses did not enter the promised land because he did what was right in his own eyes, disobeying the instruction of the Lord. Therefore, when we do things that is right in our own eyes, we lose the favor of the Lord and forfeit the rest or the peace that He wants to give us. Before I explain this further, I want to show you something interesting about Moses. It is so interesting that it disturbed me. When people challenged Moses in the wilderness, did he defend himself? Did he scold those who challenged his authority? Did he argue with those who questioned his credibility? Alam mo, hindi mo siya nakita. It was different sa case ni Job. When the friends of Job came to accuse and rebuke him, They debated for 30 long chapters. For 30 long chapters, the friends of Job was trying to prove his guilt. Si Job naman was trying to prove his innocence and integrity. Pero may tanong ako, may nanalo ba sa debate nila? Wala, no? I do not know if mas tama ang response ni Moses. Pero na-realize ko, his response made more sense. Kasi Moses and Job were fighting against perception, the perception of their accusers. And I've learned in the past that perception is reality to that person. And no amount of argument or justification can change their mind. And many times, in our conflict and sa away natin, ang kalaban natin, perception ng tao. And you notice, maski anong defend mo sa sarili mo, ayaw kang pakinggan because perception is reality to that person, maski hindi totoo. And so it is useless to fight against them. It is difficult to change perception. Only the person who has that perception can change his mind. Alam mo, the past 1 month has been very stressful for me. Pero hindi ko na-realize na stress ako. Weird, no? I only realized that I was very stressed when I went to the chiropractor 4 times in 3 weeks. Alam mo, when we were going through yung struggle namin in the past 1 month, my lower back, alam mo, all of a sudden hurt. And I first experienced that nung galing ako sa farm and naisip ko siguro meron akong maling tapak that caused it. So I went to the chiropractor. When he saw me, sabi niya, injury yan. And you should rest that. No weights, no running, no biking. So I asked, can I play golf, doc? Sabi niya, no, because that's an injury. You have to rest that and then you have to drink magnesium. So I did. Pinabalik niya ako 2 days after to do more adjustments. Pero 3 weeks after, bumalik ulit. And ang sakit talaga. So I went again. And naisip ko, siguro hindi niya ginawa ng tama. Kasi hindi naayos eh. When I arrived, sabi niya, what have you been doing? Your muscles are very angry. Sabi niya, parang galit na galit sila. Sabi ko, Doc, I have not been doing anything. Sabi niya, are you drinking your magnesium? Sabi ko, oo. Sabi ko, no golf, no running, nothing. Sabi niya, why are your muscles so angry? So I asked him, sabi ko, Doc, can stress do that to you, to a person? Sabi niya, yes. And so he made some adjustment. He asked me to go back 2 days after to do more adjustments. And then sabi ko, Doc, can I now play golf? And so nagulat siya. Sabi niya, does golf relax you? Sabi ko, yes, I feel at peace when I am walking by myself. Sabi niya, yo, sige, you play golf. I think it is better that you play golf than you get injured because your muscles are not at rest. So na-realize ko, grabe yung stress ko during the time. It all started when my children stayed for a few days with the owner of a restaurant in Valencia, kaibigan nila, that was visited by a person who tested positive for COVID-19. While the owner was being swabbed, we decided to self-quarantine the children. Pero in our panic, we bought medicine na recommend ni Dr. Alan Mericor. When the medicine came, I made the mistake of making everyone drink. And so this caused attention sa bahay. And with my children were 2 other friends na kasama nila dun sa restaurant. So there were 4 of them. The owner of the restaurant tested positive. So we called DOH to swab the children. Mabuti na lang DOH came using an ordinary car on a Sunday. So nobody noticed. Pero yung atmosphere sa farm namin became very tense already and my people were very uncomfortable. Kasi alam nila na mayroong posibleng COVID-19 positive sa bahay namin eh. And then when the result came, one of the friend of my children tested positive, while my children tested negative. Came to inform us using an ambulance, pero only because they had no other car. And when they came, it was a weekday. So the whole barangay saw. And this was when panic erupted. Sa family namin, sa negosyo namin, pati na sa kapitbahay namin. And I had to manage people's fear and contain their panic. But as we were going through that, may nasabi akong mali sa misis ko na ikinagalit niya. May nasabi ako sa mga anak ko na disappointed them. May nasabi rin ako sa mga tao ko that offended them. Marami sa tao ko ayaw na magtrabaho. Especially when si Lingling, our cook, tested positive sa rapid test. Yung mga tao ko did not work anymore because they were concerned that baka mahawa daw pamilya nila. Ako naman, ang concern ko, ang panic ko, pag hindi tumuloy ang negosyo, ano ang papangsweldo ko sa kanila? Kasi alam ko na pag nagkaroon sila ng problema, I need to take care of them. Sabi ko sa kanila, can we make a decision to stop pag nag-test positive ng COVID-19 si Lingling? Kasi alam mo, yung sabi nung DOH, the reason why Lingling tested positive was because ang dami niyang sakit. So it could be another virus. In a meeting I had with my people, alam mo, I got rebuked for not responding to the situation better. I was telling them, I'm also at shock. Hindi ko alam ano gagawin. So I apologized to them for causing the problem upon them. Kasi galing yan sa mga anak ko at kaibigan nila eh. While this was all going on, deep inside I felt bad. I told God, Lord, hindi naman ako ang may kasalanan dito, di ba? I'm just trying to manage it for everyone. Bakit lahat sila galit sa akin? And so this was when I prayed, Lord, can you bring me to a place of rest? This was also when I saw Psalm 95, verse 11, and I asked God, Lord, galit ka ba sa akin? Kasi ang gulo-gulo ng buhay ko ngayon. Pero ang conclusion ko from Psalm 95 is that the rest I wish for is not based on a place, not based on our circumstances, and not based also on the people around me. Though this has caused me emotional pain, it is not also based on the absence of trouble, but about finding peace in the middle of an emotionally stressful situation. Friends, this is what I discovered. The peace that I desire is based on the Lord's presence, is not based on the Lord's presence, but on His favor. Let me explain this. Deuteronomy chapter 12 verse 8 and 9 said that the Jews did not find rest even though He was with them because they did what was right in their own eyes. So naisip ko, in order to enjoy the rest that God desires to give me, I must receive His favor by doing what is right in His eyes. As I always say in the recent messages I give, hindi importante ang gusto ko. Importante ang gusto ni God. So as a husband, I must still be loving. Even if my wife is angry when I did not meet his expectation. As a father, I must continue to provide and protect my children, even when I feel disrespected. As a boss, I must be compassionate to my people, even if they rebuke me for failing them in the middle of a crisis. As a steward, I must remain faithful to the Lord, even though He placed me in a very difficult situation. where it has been very painful. And then I learned that it is useless to justify my actions against those who question my credibility. It is useless to argue with those who challenge my authority. Kasi perception nila yun eh. Their perception is reality to them. So as I was doing this message, sabi ko kay God, sige Lord, basta okay ako sa'yo, okay na ako. As long as you look upon me with favor, I will be at rest. And so this has really helped me be at peace with my situation. And I decided to share this with all of you. Baka you can find rest in spite of this pandemic. Alam mo, wala na tayong magagawa sa pandemic na to. But we can always choose how to respond to it. So ang importante is, how do we gain God's favor today? Jesus explained this in Matthew chapter 11, verses 28 to 29. Sabi niya, "Come to me, all you who are weary and heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your soul." The rest that Jesus offers is based on the yoke He wants us to carry. Ang labo, no? He wants to give us rest by taking on a yoke. Pero tanong ko, is it really a yoke? Why did He call it a yoke? Ano ba ang na-imagine mo? When you hear the word yoke, ano ini-imagine mo? Di ba burden? Why does Jesus want to give us a burden before He gives us rest? Alam mo, na-realize ko that the reason why He calls it a burden, it is a burden for us, not for Him. Burden siya because yung mga pinapagawa niya, they are not right before our eyes. Meaning, ayaw natin yon. Kasi we think hindi siya tama. His ways will give us rest, but it's a burden to us because we do not think it is right and it is fair. When Moses did not fight the accusers, was it a burden to him? I think so. Kasi ang natural tendency natin, lumaban parang si Job. But when he stayed quiet, when he acted on the Lord's ways, God gave him rest. And so this is what Jesus is telling us. I have given you instructions. They are not good before your eyes, but you have to die to your desires and take on what I teach you. And when you do them, you will find rest. So na-realize ko, when we are at peace in spite of the trouble we have, it means the Lord's favor is with us. But if we are tired in spite of having God in our lives, it is probable that we are doing what is right in our eyes and not on His eyes. Tiredness and stress is not caused by the people around us, because God can protect us from them, like the way He protected Moses and Job. We get tired when we insist on doing things our way. Friends, God has given us the Bible to guide us in life. It is not the basic instruction before leaving earth. It is basic instruction by which to live on earth. If we follow them, He will give us rest. So I wish you would find your peace in spite of the pandemic. But that peace that peace can only be found in the Lord. But His presence will not assure us of rest unless we find favor in Him by doing what is right in His eyes. So I wish you the best, and I pray that you will just enjoy this pandemic as a journey with the Lord. May He continue to be with you and bless you.